And welcome back. It's so good to have you with me today. I have a very, very special guest who's near and dear to my heart because his journey in pharma, life sciences, and cannabis is very, very similar to our journey. Kyle Barich is with us. He is the former CEO of CDM, Klein Davis Mann, one of the most iconic ad agencies in the pharma ad business out there. And he was most associated with the launch of Viagra. And he was with CDM for almost a quarter century, 23 years, which in ad years we're just talking about is insane. But he got to touch every aspect of pharma marketing, including physician outreach, including the patient engagement, every aspect of a launch that you get involved with. And because PharmaCentra and our journey in this space is so similar, when Kyle and I first met, we had almost the identical story to tell in terms of how we discovered cannabis as a medicine, how we discovered that it's actually science. And Kyle's reaction was, geez, you're pitching stuff right out of our pitch book. So we bonded almost immediately because our journeys are almost the same. We are looking at and targeting the convergence of pharma and traditional life sciences with cannabis. Right now, the viewpoint that people have, the attitude that people have has changed dramatically in the last few years. The stigma has really withered away dramatically. And here at PharmaCentra and CannabisBPO, we've decided that we want to really focus on that convergence and really be the leaders in that convergence of medicine and cannabis. And so in light of that, Kyle's our first guest with this coming out party where we're basically saying cannabis and pharma, it's really one and the same. Time has come. It's not something to be embarrassed about anymore. And I'm thrilled to have Kyle with us right now. Kyle, welcome to the show. Take a few minutes to tell us your journey in cannabis because I think it's truly unique and it makes me smile every time I hear it.
Well, thanks, Dan. You know, we know each other a long time, and thanks for finally letting me come on. You make me sound good. Yeah, I started in advertising such a long time ago, and I just sort of ended up in healthcare advertising. It wasn't something that I had planned for it, but I knew I would be in advertising. But once I sort of got into that space, it was a really good match in terms of the ability to do good advertising, creative work, working with clients and all that sort of thing. But to do it in the healthcare space was just very intellectually stimulating because every day there would be just, there's always a new disease, there's always a new drug, there's always a new therapeutic category, there's always a new way. And as just being around for a long time allowed me to be a part of lots of different waves of things that happened, like the advent of direct-to-consumer advertising, or everything moving from primary care medicine into oncology and rare disease, all of the consolidation of the advertising industry as, working for Omnicom for all these years. So, so many of the trends can't help but been swept up into the middle of. And did that for, as you said, somehow 23 years, which I'm not sure what's longer, 1 year in cannabis or 1 year in advertising.
Well, that's a good argument to be made for that's in nascent ages. You were really involved in pharma in the nascent business when DTC, direct to consumer, really started happening. It was brand new back then. Rogaine was literally only a few years before that, and the dam was bursting out. So there's a lot of similarity between those early crazy days of pharma and the early very crazy days of cannabis in many ways. And I would think you would agree with that. But talk to us about the medicine. When you discovered cannabis and when you decided that you made that fateful decision to launch into cannabis and you joined Holistic and launched Cannaceutica, a very unique formulation. Tell us that journey, because I want to hear that journey.
Sure, thanks. So the idea was after so many years in advertising, and as much as I love, the pace and the competitiveness and the teamwork and the pitching, and like I really did love all of that work. At some point, it just is that all I'm going to do for the rest of my life. And I was very interested in the cannabis industry always, and had a friend at Feuerstein Kulik, which is a major cannabis focused law firm in New York City, and we really just started exploring the cannabis space. Went to MJ BizCon in Vegas, where it all happens, a bunch of years ago. This was back in 2017, and what I came away from the idea is that this is an industry that would be very open to a pharma brand approach, like even an old school pharma brand approach, where the issue is that doctors just need evidence. You provide them with evidence in a creative and compelling way, and with that evidence, they will choose one brand over another. And with that idea and bringing it in front of doctors, it's really the same idea for Cannabis. We chose chronic pain as the area for study because it's the area that has the most evidence behind it, where we'd have the greatest chance of success. So and chronic pain is also the #1 reason why people use cannabis for medical reason. And I'll stop there for a moment.
Well, let's talk about that. You got involved with Cannabis, you got involved with Holistic, launched a brand new brand. And one of the things we've been saying all along when we got into cannabis is it really is about the customer journey and the customer and patient experience. And probably nobody understands that better than two guys like you and I who have been in pharma for 20 years, because I think we all agree pharma knows how to sell pills and sell their product and to create a patient journey and experience. And that's why when I met you, I was super excited to hear about Cannabis and what you're trying to do, because you're taking the pharma discipline and the pharma approach to launch it and educate physicians, because that is the huge opportunity out there, I think, long term. And especially when you look at specific markets like the senior market, which we all agree is kind of the hot topic in cannabis these days. So help us understand what lessons you took from pharma that you brought to and tell us a little bit about Cannabis first, the formulation and how you came up with it, and the evidence that you're gathering behind it, because I think that's important for people to hear as well.
Sure. So Cannabis itself, which is Canna and Sudica, like pharmaceuticals, and you can go to cannabisbpO.com to learn about that. Our ambition is to gather evidence to support our claims, just like we would always do. As many people know who are listening to this, cannabis is federally illegal and legal in something like 36 or 37 states and changing all the time. As a result, the FDA does not currently oversee what we say, but rather the state level regulatory authorities do. So we wanted to bring all the discipline from pharma, FDA level scrutiny, if it was to come. So we would never make a claim without having evidence behind it. So with that, finding an institution that would give us institutional review board approval and allow us to do a study with cannabis, which is federally illegal, when most hospitals or most institutions take federal money, is a really difficult thing. It's a long story, but the short version of it is we got UC Irvine, which is a very prestigious institution, to approve our protocol, and that protocol is being complete this week. In fact, about 100 patients who have taken the medicine are being observed, and we're expecting just in a few months we're going to be receiving exciting data results. One delay that we're finding is that our data team is in Israel, and there's a lot of challenges with getting data from the U.S. to Israel in a world of war and cyber attacks.
Yeah, that's a little twist I'm sure you didn't expect when you went.
It was not in our plans. A war in Israel was not in our plans.
Well, that's part of our journey as well. As I went to Israel, my first foray into cannabis, I went to go to a science conference in Israel, where it's the center of all science and medicine in global cannabis, and their attitude toward cannabis is what really changed my view overnight. And when I decided that our company, PharmaCentra, would dive into the cannabis space and try and be those experts. Help us understand as you're launching Cannabis. This is the case study that I want the industry to keep their eyes on, because I think this is very important. There's over 1 million practitioners, doctors out there, physicians who can write a prescription or an OTC recommendation, over-the-counter recommendation, with this actually would fall in that category. How do you plan on approaching these physicians, or which segments of physicians, and how do you plan on educating doctors on cannabinoid science? Because to me, that's the passion of what we're trying to accomplish as an industry. Is once we get doctors on board, I think everything changes. Because right now, what happens, the patient goes to a doctor and the doctor knows nothing, and so the doctor says, "I don't know anything. Go away, leave me alone," and the patient is lost. And so everybody loses. The patient loses, the industry loses, the doctor loses.
Yes, insightful, well said. We're intimately familiar with this challenge, and we're very familiar with this challenge from being in pharma and biotech and medical device for all the same years, just substitute dispensary for for pharmacy, and a lot of these things are very similar. The big challenge, and we have lots of ideas that we could just port right over. The biggest challenge is that while a pharmaceutical might charge $13,500 for an annual cost for their medicine, we're charging $25 a bottle. And so for $25 a bottle, where it gets much closer to an OTC medicine, the level of support and education on a per physician basis can't quite be the same that I'm sort of used to and where might be used to from pharma. It's just not economically feasible. So we have big ideas, but we have to be realistic of what we could deliver for the sort of like nascent early pioneering days. So it's more non-personal, more in dispensary. And one of the biggest, greatest challenges that we have is that the people who need it most are not necessarily in dispensaries and don't always feel comfortable going.
Yeah, and that's the challenge that I think we talked about this in other podcasts. Why do we insist on having grandma talk about Alaskan thunderfuck? So it just doesn't make sense that we have to change our terminology. We have to change how we approach this business, and educating practitioners and educating consumers, I think, is a crucial component of that. And that's one of the challenges we faced: is how do you educate physicians, practitioners, in an environment that isn't quite like pharma, but really does require the same scrutiny and the same oversight as pharma. And that's the challenge we've all been struggling with, I think. How do we educate physicians out there? So I'll put the question to you. How do we educate physicians?
Sure. So it's a big question. Well, I'll give your company a plug and what you guys do. A plug that is very relevant to this. My job as a chief marketing officer, right, is to listen to customers, understand, get insights from them to help develop brands and support our stores. Our stores, Liberty Cannabis is the name of our stores at Holistic. And then we have a number of brands that we support beyond Cannabiscutica, which I can mention in a moment. One of our key areas for listening, besides listening to social media, is listening through the channels you guys provide, right? So in our company, if someone on our bottle, if there's an 800 number, and email or DM us social media for one of our brands, this is our greatest listening, and all of a sudden we'll hear 50 or 100 people talking about something that we have to address, and we do. So that's a great. So taking that information and hearing that from the customer, from the physician's customer themselves, is hearing that all their patients have this problem. So every day, doctors hear from patients that they have chronic pain, and their nephew told them that CBD works, or their uncle, or everyone has some sort of remedy or idea, and the doctors have no idea what to do with this information. Doctors are lost, right? That's where the communication breaks down.
Truly lost and starting to get slightly embarrassed. I think I joke that in the traditional pharma, in our traditional world, brands will spend billions of dollars to get you to talk to your doctor about fill in the blank, Skyrizi, Embra, whatever it might be. And at $13,000 a dose, it's easy to justify putting those big ads on TV. We get it. But this is really crowdsourced, what we're seeing with cannabis. Patients are coming to their doctors because their nephew, their brother, sister, aunt, someone had some great success with cannabis and said, "Hey, I'm really succeeding with this. You should try it too. Go talk to your doctor." They go to the doctor and say, "I want to talk to you about cannabis," and the doctor says, blah blah blah. So it's been my comment for years that any brand that eventually comes out there and educates and owns that education with doctors is going to own that sector.
Of course, there's going to be the pioneering doctors first, and there's going to be the laggards behind them. So we're, of course, focusing on the ones who are already open-minded to it. They're already open-minded. There are a lot of doctors who are open-minded and get the question, but they don't have an easy product. So we've created a product that's a capsule that is easily dosed, and it comes with dosing instructions. And so that's one of the big concerns that people have is taking too much, having a bad experience. So when you open up the package of Cannabiscutica, you're going to get dosing instructions that help you titrate or updose, to manage both the chronic pain efficacy that you were looking for, but also the side effects that could be very common with escalating doses of cannabis.
Well, that's what I love about what the product that you're trying to do is it looks and walks and talks like a farmer product. The only difference is you can only get it in a dispensary. But eventually,
And the price.
And the price. Eventually, you look at the industry as a whole, we look forward 10, 15, 20 years. I like to say that big tobacco has made their bets in cannabis and it placed big bets. Obviously, alcohol and beverage with Constellation, those guys, they've all made their big bets on companies. And what we're
Yes.
seeing, and nobody's really talking about as much as the big bets that pharma is placing as well. And
But
what
that is the third in the unholy trinity. That would be
and I
the
think
third
it's
that is
actually
coming
the
in.
biggest. I think it's the biggest by far. Because eventually, I mean, who owns more IP and intellectual property patents on cannabis? It's BMS. Pfizer, I think, is number 5 or 6 on that list in terms of intellectual property and patents. So eventually, it's going to look and walk and talk and act just like a pharma product. And that's why we like to say we want to be at that convergence when that happens.
Sure. It's good to see that we both have transferable skills along the way.
Because we might need it. But help me understand, do you think that's truly possible? Do you think that will happen in this lifetime, in this world, from where we are today? Because I really thought we would be closer to that vision today than we are. And now it's clear that it's another 10, 15 years out.
Yeah, I've gone on the same journey as you have. I'm seeing more barriers than opportunities as pharma would get into this for all the reasons that everyone who's close to this knows. The idea of trying to patent a specific strain or specific medicine in this area that's currently federally illegal. I mean, I'm a marketing leadership, right? And part of my job is making and protecting our brands through trademarks. Getting a federal trademark for a federally illegal product. It's a whole conversation in and of itself. Each one of these are just huge challenges.
Yeah. Well, even 280E, I was just having a discussion this morning about 280E and the ability to write off expenses and how that's hobbling the industry. And some people are taking some in our industry are taking the position of not paying the tax bill and hoping that it goes away and letting the federal government fund their growth at 3% penalty.
It's a risky strategy, if you ask me.
I agree. It's a very risky strategy. I don't want to ever have the IRS looking down my books too carefully. So in terms of where we are today, in terms of Cannaceutica, in terms of the cannabis industry, the lessons that we take from pharma, what are some of the things we can do in terms of the patient journey? Because that's to me the most passionate part of. We like to talk about education, educating consumers, and what are some of the barriers and challenges to educating consumers on cannabis as a medicine?
Well, here's one opportunity, which, believe it or not, is the bud tender. Mm-hmm. So the bud tender, right, who manages the conversation between people who come into dispensaries, really are not they're not a difficult target to get to. Mm-hmm. They don't get any information that's anywhere like this. Mm-hmm. And if you think about it, a lot of these folks are real passionate about cannabis. It's not the best paying job, but they do it because they love it and they believe in it. And these are folks that if you gave them just a little bit of information, it's amazing how they'll take on that expert sort of guru idea. So sure, that's a limited audience that walks in the dispensary, but how many people walk in the dispensary that has the mom who has chronic pain, or the wife that can't sleep, or what have you? So there's a huge opportunity with the bud tender. There's one easy low-hanging fruit.
If we look at the senior market, which you and I have talked about a lot, and it's clearly the fastest growing, the most obviously opportune, because the brand impression that people have on their first experience, if it's good, is it could be a forever customer. And how do you train a bud tender to talk to a senior customer? Help me understand that, because you have the retail experience now, because it's a different animal. How do you guide a senior patient in a way that's going to get them to come back over and over?
Yeah. So our company is Holistic Industries, and Holistic Industries retail chain is called Liberty Cannabis, and Liberty Cannabis is in a bunch of states around with about 16 different stores now. Our founder and CEO, Josh Gennerson, comes from a family of retail. His parents and grandparents and great grandparents own a place called Schneider's, which is a wine and liquor store on Capitol Hill, right across from the Capitol. So if you're a senator or Supreme Court justice or have been for the past 90 years, you shop at Schneider's. So as a result, our company has had a real front row seat to legislation, to licensing opportunities, and it's just been just a wonderful thing. The reason I bring that up is that there's a spirit, like you walk into a place like Schneider's, you feel like you know someone, you got a guy, you got a woman, you got someone in the business who's looking out for you, and there's a kind of that retail take care of you spirit that it's been carried over into the Liberty stores, and that's something that, like, there's just like an empathetic vibe. Usually, to be honest about it, there's one of the bud tenders is really good with the older folks or really good with the medical conversation, but they're all trained that way.
Got it. It really does come to training and education, and I was just in New Jersey, and I was in line at a dispensary, and there was 3 seniors ahead of me, in their 70s clearly, who knew exactly what they wanted, who walked right up to the counter, plunked down, walked out, and it was clear that they were in there once a month spending $100. And that's a pretty impressive lifetime value if you own that patient forever.
It's a pretty impressive lifetime value, but I'd be remiss if we didn't talk about the other side of this business, right? Which is, once a market goes recreational, the pure medical market, people with cards and what have you, goes to something like 9 or 10%. Pick any market, right? Massachusetts or Maryland or what have you. And that center of the market, the bulk of the market, isn't grandma and grandpa online spending $100 a month, but it's someone who's spending $100 a visit multiple times a week on multiple products. And you can imagine that gets the industry's attention quite a bit, where the lighter spenders, while important and makes you feel good and gives you value, and it's why I'm in the industry, the pressure to focus on the other side of the business is enormous.
Right. And the good news is there are so many products and choices, and once someone does become an experienced user and isn't afraid to try new products based on recommendations, I think that should be the goal of taking that $100 a month grandma and converting them and say, hey, try this. That's what a good bud tender can do. You seem to like this, grandma. Would you like something else to try?
Sure.
That's the value of a talented bud tender. And I've watched talented bud tenders in action. Boy, it can make an enormous difference. And we have the same experience on a phone. When we have a phone rep, when we have a patient on the phone that's talking about something they really want, and they don't have it available, and we have to substitute it. It takes some education. It takes some selling. So, well, Kyle, this is a fascinating conversation. I've really enjoyed talking about this convergence of pharma, and I really hope that one day you and I can sit and talk, and it's federally legal, and we can talk about how this convergence happened. We can look backwards and say, geez, remember when? There were so many barriers.
I'll meet you at the pharmacy where we could pick it up together.
I mean, that to me is the most exciting when you watch what happens in more mature markets, how it is actually morphing into the pharmacy. In Canada, the biggest dispenser of cannabis is the pharmacy, which is what it should be. And that's the language we speak. So I look forward to watching that happen and being at your side as both a provider and a friend to help navigate this exciting market.
All right. All the best. Thanks for having me on, and all the best to you and your team.
Thank you, Kyle.
Take care. Bye-bye.